Hi. In preparation for the masterclass on designing a web page using HTML and CSS, there are some prerequisites that will be needed. And so in order to save some time during the actual masterclass, decided to just cover the process for getting those prerequisites on your machine. And the first prerequisite that we need is Visual Studio Code that you can get by searching on Google for Visual Studio Code. That will bring up the first result here. Just go straight to download. Okay, and select your operating system here. If you're on Mac, this is you. If you're on Linux, this is you. If you're on Windows, like I am, so this is a fresh install of Windows. I'm running it on VirtualBox, so it doesn't have anything essentially. It is just blank. I just installed it recently, and so the entire process that I follow here will be for you if you do not have any kind of development environment. But if you already do, then skip this part. Okay, so I'll select the system installer for x64 because that is my architecture, the architecture of my system. And if you do not know the architecture of your system, you can go on to the File Explorer, then right click on this PC, Properties, then this will tell you what kind of operating system that you're running. Okay, so 64-bit, I'm on 64, you might be on 64 or x86. Okay, cool. So then come back here, look for the system installer. You can use the user installer, but if you have more than one user running on your system, then if you just install it on that particular user, then you won't be able to access the program on a different user. So that's why I'm opting for the system installer, because in case I have other users on the same system, then they can also be able to get access to the program. Okay, so let's go into download. It's 94 megabytes, so no need to pause. So as it does that, ideally this is all we need to run our code. Okay, but if time persists us in the masterclass, then we're going to do a bit of deployment, and the way that we're going to handle the deployment is through what's called Vercel. So I'll just go back to google.com, and then so for Vercel to work with Vercel, the easiest way is to connect what's called a GitHub account. Again, if you're new to this is yours. If you already know what GitHub is, you have an account, you can skip this part. So we need a GitHub account. Okay, so just search for GitHub, or just go straight to github.com. Okay, then from here just sign up as you would a normal app. So it will ask you some things. It will ask for your email. Actually, you could have signed up straight from here, but okay. So again, if you have an account, all you need is to sign in. So you enter your email that you're going to be using for this account. If you have a student email, the better. So go through that process. I already have an account, so I won't be doing all that. So once you have a GitHub account, then you need to set up GitHub on your system. Okay, and to do that, I'll just go back to Google, and I'm going to search for git-scm. Okay, so this is what will allow us to connect to Git through what's called our terminal. Okay, and we need to download and install it. So when you open the site, you'll get the option to download for Windows. I'm going to do that. So click here to download the latest 64-bit version for Git for Windows again, depending on your processor. If you have a 32-bit x86, then this is you. So I'll just go with this. So it's 65 MB. So I'll just wait for it to complete. So VS Code is already done. And for VS Code, actually for both of them, all you need is to just run the installer. So just select them straight from here, or you can open the folder location. So by default, they're taken to your downloads folder. You can set up an entire different folder for your downloads. You have a different partition, but again, this is just all on you. So I'll just run VS Code setup from here first. Since you downloaded the system installer, it will ask you for granted privileges, user account control prompt. So click on yes. Accept the agreement. Yes, that's okay. Paste the code, that's okay. So I don't want a desktop icon. I rarely use the icons on my desktop. Then you want to select this to add open with code action to Windows Explorer file context menu. Okay. Then directory context menu, same. So register code as an editor for supported file types. Yes, please. And add to path. So make sure all these are selected. This one is optional. If you want the icon on your desktop, you can have that. You don't need to, because you can always access it from the start menu. But if you're used to using the icons on your desktop, sure, go ahead. So next, confirm this that it's installing in program files. Start menu folder is Visual Studio Code. Then the other add open with code. There should be two. Then register code as an editor for supported file types. Yes. Add to path. Yes. So then install. All right. So that's, I don't know how long this is going to take. So I'll just post the video and then come back when it's done. All right. So it's done installing. It took about a minute. So once it's done, you'll get this. Then the option to launch Visual Studio Code. You can launch it, but you do not have to. Well, you can just launch it to see what it does and whether it's done. So the VM is a bit slow, but it's okay. Cool. So this is Visual Studio Code. Again, well, I didn't mention this, but there are two Visual Studios. Okay, so there's Visual Studio and there's Visual Studio Code. So you want to make sure that you've downloaded Visual Studio Code. You can still use Visual Studio, but that's more for the low-level languages. When you want to work with C#, it's a good one. But for just plain web dev, which is what we're going to be doing, Visual Studio Code is better. It's more lightweight. Okay. So themes, I just want it to be the default. So next section, go to the extensions. I don't want to download. Oh, actually, I do want to install. Okay, so let's go through the setup process. You will need this. It's called Prettier. Don't know that I can select from here. Yes. So when you get to this part with extensions, you're going to need Prettier. Okay. For this particular masterclass. So Prettier, just you can work without it, but Prettier, it formats your code to make it better looking. Okay, and the reason you use it is to just have some uniformity in your code, so that if you're using like single quotes, then they can be consistent. If you're using double quotes, they can be consistent. The indentation can also be consistent across the entire app. Okay, so you just come here to preview. In case you didn't use the welcome screen and you want to know how to install the applications, just come here. There is this icon of the extensions that you can use to get to the same place. And if you use this, so not clicking here, if you use this icon, then you just come up here and search for preacher. Might bring up a bit more results than what we had, but it should be the first one. So it's the prettier dash code formatter. Let me just zoom in. So it's the prettier dash code formatter. That's the one you want, the one with the tick again is pretty. So you click it, you can read this, the documentation, then you install it. As that is installing, it's actually done installing. So prettier allows you to set a few things. Okay, we're going to cover that when we get to creating a sample project on here. So for now, you can just minimize VS Code. So I'll just play it so that it's not using up a lot of my RAM. I have limited RAM for this virtual machine. So next, we're going to set up Git. And it already downloaded, so we have it in our downloads folder. So we're going to do the same thing, just double click, wait for the installation prompt. So yes, you can read this, you can just skip over the terms and conditions as we always do. Then next, again, icons if you want it, make sure these are ticked. So Windows Explorer integration, open Git bash here and open Git UI here, then Git LFS, okay, associate.git configuration files with the default text editor, associate.sh files to be run with bash, check daily for Windows updates. Well, you can forget for Windows updates, you can tick that or you might leave it off. Okay, then this one, this is a very important one, new, add a git bash profile to Windows terminal. If you're on Windows 11, then you need that. Click it, we're going to see why, and then just leave the rest as they are. So by default, the ones you need will be selected, except this one for the git bash profile to Windows terminal. As far as I know, Windows terminal is only on Windows 11. I'm not sure about whether it is also on Windows 10, but in case it is, then select this as well. So with that, we'll click next. Start menu folder, okay. Git, that's okay. Then here, default editor. If you're a power user, you already have Git set up machine. But if you're following this process for installing Git on your system, then use a more user-friendly version called Nano. Okay. For your editor through the terminal. So select use Nano editor by default. So ideally there are other easier ones. There is Notepad++. If you installed it, there's Visual Studio Code. We have installed it, so you can select this. But if you're working with the terminal, then get used to a terminal application such as Nano or Vim if you want to complicate your life. Okay, But of course, with more experience, you can always move from using Nano to using Vim. But if you're just getting started, then select Nano. Next, so here for initial branch, then do not let Git decide, override. This is important. Override it. Select the override option, then have main as the default branch name. If you don't know what all these are, just bear with me, just follow along. Main. So then next, Git from the command line and also from that party software. Yes, actually, you want to select this. So use Git and optional Unix tools from the command prompt. Okay. So select that option here and not the second one or the first one. Then use bundled open SSH. That's okay. Use open SSL library. That's okay. Check out Windows style, commit Unix style, line endings. That's okay. Use main t. Use Windows default console window. No, use main t. Then fast forward or merge. So leave all these as their default, as the default options. Next, can select this. Next, select this, and also select this. So then install. So again, I don't know how long this will take exactly in this machine, so I'll pause. It seems like it's going quite fast actually, but I'll still pause and then come back once it's done. So it's done. It also took about a minute to install. So you don't need to launch git bash, you don't need to view the release notes. So I'll select both of those, then click on finish. Okay. Now once you have those two installed, you're almost ready. So I'll just exit out of that. I will need to log into my GitHub profile. So I'll open a new tab, go into github.com. And then sign in. My username is Makmati. My password is hidden somewhere here. Just move that out of the screen. I have a really long master password. No. Close. Alright, so I need the GitHub password. It's right here. Then I'll paste that on there and sign in. So again, you need to be signed into your default on your default browser. So here this is a fresh install of Windows. So the only browser that I have right now is Edge. I haven't installed Chrome or any other. So on your default browser, make sure you're logged onto GitHub. Then now the next thing that you need to do is to set up GitHub on our machine. So open the terminal app if you're on Windows 11. So by default, it opens PowerShell. If this is the first time you're using the terminal app and you've never changed, it will open PowerShell. We don't want to use PowerShell. We want to use the Git bash profile. Okay. So just open another tab. You can change that. Let me set it So you can see on under the startup for default profile, you can come here and select git bash, and then what else do we need? Actually, that's all we need. Then save. So that was in the settings, which you can get to through. How can you get to the settings? Oops. Actually, I have no idea how to get to the settings. There must be some kind of a shortcut. Okay. Is it? No. I thought it's supposed to be right here somewhere. Hmm. Okay. So there is a shortcut, which is control and comma, that will load up these settings in case when you launched the terminal app, you didn't get that notice up here that had the link to just go straight to settings. Okay, so you can click on the control and comma. Okay, if you're okay, I was about to say if you're on Mac, that should be command and comma, but ideally if you're on Mac, then you're not using the Windows terminal. So this is for you if you're using Windows terminal. So control and comma will open the settings. And then from the settings under startup, select the default profile from being PowerShell to being Git Bash, so that by default this can be open. Okay, so I'll just close these two tabs. So now whenever you open a new tab, or even just launching terminal, we just launch terminal up, then that by default opens the Git Bash. So Windows Terminal can be set as the default terminal application in the settings. What has been set as the default terminal? Okay. So here, this is what that prompt was about. So default terminal application, change it to Windows Terminal. Then save. You no longer get that prompt when you relaunch terminal. So for the apps that you'll commonly be using, you can just pin them to the taskbar. So when you need to launch them, then you do not need to go through this entire start process. You can just click it right here. And for the ones that you're not using, like this Microsoft Store, then you can unpin. All right, cool. So when you're here, there's a few things that you need to do. You need to tell Git. So first you can confirm that Git is installed by running git-v. Ideally it is installed because you have git bash, okay? But you can just run this. If you're using a different terminal, if you're on Windows 10 that doesn't have these options, okay, let me not say it doesn't have, because I haven't used Windows 10 in a while. I don't know what updates they have received, so you might have the terminal or not. But if you're on a different OS and you do not have the option for setting git bash as the default profile, so you confirm that git is installed by running this command. Right, so on your GitHub profile, then you need to go to settings. Okay, then there's the SSH and GPG queues. So I do not use SSH keys because I find that to be not the easiest way to use Git and GitHub. But you can go through the process of setting up Git and GitHub through SSH keys. And I'll just search for an article for that. GitHub setup using SSH keys. Oh, really do not like my Bing. So I'll just go into google.com and search the same thing here. So there's this there are many results that you can use to as a tutorial for that. So for this particular one, setup, we're just going to use credentials, and the way we do that is by, let's create a new repo. So new repository. If this is your first time using GitHub, this is for you. If you're already familiar with Git and GitHub, this process you can skip. Okay, so this is not for you. So repository name, I'm actually going to create the repository that that I'm going to be using for the masterclass, and I'll call it just web masterclass. Okay, so this will be the repository that contains the different files and folders that we're going to be deploying to Vercel later. So leave it as public. Don't select any of the other things. Then create repository. Okay, so we're just going to go through this process, and this process is what will allow us now to eventually connect Git and GitHub. But before we get there, actually, there are some configurations that you need to run. You need to run, if my memory serves me right, it is git config -- user dot name, then in quotes, just set your name. Okay, like that. Again, if my memory serves me right, that should be the command. Okay, so it seems that is not it. So user dot name should be user dot what? Let's see. Okay, I know it's user dot something. So we'll just go again onto google.com. Then how to config, not how to edit, how to config Git. Actually misspelled, that's okay. So first time, Git setup. Let's see. Actually, this is what was missing. So it should be -- global, then user.name. Okay, so I'll just open that here, make it a bit smaller, or you can open this to the side. So we have, let me zoom in a bit. So it's not -- user.name, it is global. Git config -- global, then user.name, then set your name. Okay, then the second one is your email. So the email that I'm using for that account is my school email, which is mark.smithy@strathmore.edu. So set your email. So git config -- global user.email. Your name, it can match with what you have on your GitHub, doesn't have to. Then your email must match with what you have on your GitHub. Okay. Then with those two, I think we are set. So let me just confirm from this process. Code.editor, don't need to change that. Default branch name. We already set this as we were installing. Okay, so we don't need to reset this. But in case you didn't set it, you can just run this command to set your default branch to be main. Then check your settings, git config -- list. You can do that. Git config -- list. So there's all these that were added when we were installing. So credential manager, credential helper is manager. Then default branch. So this was set. Then now we've set the name and we've set the email. So we're set to continue. Now in order to do this, you need to create a project. And to create a project, so right now I'm on my home folder. pwd should show us where I am. I'm in C users Mac M. So my username is Mac M on this machine. So I don't want to create my projects here or in C. I want to have a different partition. And from when I checked earlier, I saw that my partition has not been loaded. So I'll just load that real quick. You can bear with me. Device manager, actually, disk manager. So search for disk manager and then select create and format hard disk partitions. So skip this process if you already know where to set up. It's already here, so I don't know why it's not showing up. I think I need to give it a letter path. So add, let me just give it E. Then okay. So that now loads it, and I have data E. So I need to navigate into that partition. So I'm now inside the E directory, partition, and it only has the system volume information. I'll create a new folder for projects, because I might have other things in this partition, not just the development stuff. So I'll create projects and then I'll move into it. Then I'm going to create now the folder name for this particular project. So I'll give it the same name as I did on the repository, which was web-masterclass. Okay. And then I'll move into it. So change directory. So these are commands for creating directories. Make dir, it is shortened for make directory. cd is change directory. ls is list. So to list the contents of the current directory. So when you're here, make sure, so this is your current working directory. We do another pwd. So pwd is print working directory. It will show us where we currently are. Okay, and we're in web masterclass folder, which is where I want us to be. And while you're in here, you can open it. You can open it using your file explorer by using start, then dot, and that will take you here directly. Or you can just open file explorer normally, then navigate. So I'm in D, then projects, then web masterclass. And from here you can create the files that we need, but we're developers, or you're a future developer, depending on whether you're a beginner or you're seasoned. So we're going to use the terminal to create the files that we need. Okay, and the command for that is touch, and we need an index file, index.html. We also need a style .css, and we might need some JavaScript. So ideally this is just an HTML and CSS masterclass, but we might need a bit of JS. So I'm just going to create it. If you won't need it, then that's okay. And then now, after that, I can just confirm that I have the 3 files. And if I go back to my file explorer, then we can see them right here. Okay, cool. Then you can already launch this on your VS Code using code dot. Remember that option that we selected for adding code to your path? Excuse me. That's what this does. So by running the command code dot, you'll get, by adding code to your path, then you get this option on there. So we have the welcome screen as we had seen earlier. You can just exit out of that. It's freezing. Oh, okay. So trust the authors in all files. I had not seen this prompt. Trust the authors of all files in the parent folder projects. So that you don't get this prompt in future, just select that. Then yes, I trust the authors. Cool. So now I can cancel that. This is a bit small, so I'll just zoom in so it's a bit clearer to see. Cool. So we are in the folder web masterclass. We can see that here, and we have our files as we created them. Okay, so we're going to come back to that later. Now you just need to push. Actually, let me just set up like a default structure. We'll go through this in the masterclass, but for now I'll just set up a default structure by using the snippet. Okay, that will give me this default structure. So all HTML files need to have this structure. Okay, so I'll give this a title of web masterclass, then save it. Under the configuration, so remember when I said that there are some configurations that we're going to make later for Preacher. So I'll just come here under indentation, and I'll select, I like using spaces, but not 4, but 2. Okay, so once I select that, so saving this file should, okay, I expected it to move this here. Let me just add a paragraph and confirm that. Confirm that is going to indent as it should. Okay. So I've not set up a few things. After you installed Prettier, the extension, so the installed one should be here. Depending on whether this is a fresh install of VS Code or not, you might have other extensions. So I've only installed Prettier over here. Now I need to tell VS Code to use Prettier as the default formatter. So that's why it's not formatting. So you can see that my code, we mentioned indentation earlier. When I save this file, it is not getting indented. Ideally, I can do it manually like that, and that should be okay. But I don't want to do it manually. So Prettier helps us while coding. When I just save this file, it should format it. Okay, and to get there, then you'll use the shortcut control and comma, or don't remember. Okay, is it under preferences? Yes, so preferences, then settings. You can see the shortcut here. The hotkey is control plus comma. So file, preferences, then settings will get you to the same place. So I'm in my settings, and what I want to do is the commonly used ones, autosave. Actually not there. I just want to search for format. So search for format, and then under your editor, default formatter, select prettier. Okay, default formatter, set it to be prettier, and then you also want to set this format on save. Okay, so once those two are done, if I go back now to my index, so remember what I had earlier, my p tag being all the way down here, and I also had this being like indented, two indented. So now if I save, everything will get indented as it should. Okay, so the head, which is a child element of the HTML, will be indented, and then the meta tags and the title, which are children elements of the head, then will be indented inside there. So there's a bit of a hierarchy now in our code. Okay, so those two settings need to be set up. So the default formatter and the format on save. Cool. So now we're done with this file. Again, this is not the masterclass, this is just a setup video. So we'll exit out of VS Code. So everything else will be done in the masterclass pertaining now the project itself. So the HTML, the CSS, and the JS. So now the next thing is to have those files appear in our web masterclass folder, or rather repo. Okay, so we go back to our terminal, and what we're going to do, the first step is to initialize the repo. Okay, so you don't need to do this part. You can do it to create a readme file. Actually, I'll just do it. So before the git init, I'll create a readme, but then I do not want just the text web-masterclass. So I'll edit it just a bit to be web masterclass, and that will be outputted into the readme.md. Okay, that's what the echo command does. You give it a string to print and a file to print it in. If the file does not exist, which in our case it doesn't, it will create it and it will have these contents. So if I do that and I do an ls, now I'm going to see the readme.md, and if I want to check the contents of the readme.md, I can use cut then the file, and we'll see what we've added in the readme. Okay, let me just zoom in a bit more here. And maybe just increase this a bit. Cool. So now this is just a normal folder. Okay, we need to convert it into a Git repository, and the way you do that is by initializing Git. Okay, and the command to use is git init, and that will initialize the empty Git repository in this folder. Okay, and now we have a branch name here. So whenever you come across this branch name, then you know that the current folder that you're in is a what? Is a Git repository. So right now it's just a local repo. We need to push those files up here, and the process now is to add the files. So if we do a git status, we will see what the current status of a Git repository is, and we have untracked files, the readme that we've just created, the index we created earlier, the script, and the style. So we need to add all these files. So in this part here, they're saying git add readme because they're assuming that the only file that you have is the readme.md, but we have others and we want to add all of them. So the command for that is not git add readme, it's going to be git add dot, so which will add all the changes into the staging area, and you should not see any kind of error response. The warning is okay, just ignore that. Then we do a git status, and we're going to see now that this has turned green, meaning that they are in the staging area, and what's left is just now to commit them. Okay, so git commit. So this is not a Git and GitHub crash course, so I won't really go deep into what all this means. I'll just say that this is the initial setup. Okay, So once that is committed, if we do a git status, nothing to commit, working tree clean, you don't need to run this command, because this command assumes that you're not in the main branch, but we are already in the main branch. So running this will not have any consequence. Okay, so you can skip it. If you're on the master branch, if you're in your configuration, you didn't set the default git init branch to be main, and you see master over here, then you should run this command. Okay, but ideally, if you're following the setup process, then you should have set main as your default branch. So the next command that you need to run is this git remote add origin, then that link, the link to the repo. So I'll just copy it to save time on typing, and then paste it and run it. So git remote add origin, if you do not get an error, then you're good. And then we need to run the last command right here. I'll also just copy it, paste it, git push -u origin main. Now when we run this, we'll get an issue, because git doesn't have the credentials that we need for this account. Okay, and so it's going to bring up this prompt, okay, that will ask us to connect to GitHub. If you already had Git and GitHub set up, then none of this will work. If you just do the git push -u origin main, then that will just push the project to your GitHub profile by default. But this is a new installation of Git on our machine, and so we need to set it up, and you only need to do this once on your machine. So once you've done this, then you won't need to do it again. So I'll just select sign in with your browser. So it will ask us to complete authentication on the browser. Okay. All right, so it already completed the authentication. Normally there is some response over here that tells us that if you are not logged into Git, then you'd have received the prompt to log into your GitHub account, and then you'd be redirected to this 127.0.0.1, then this port and the code. Okay, and here normally, if my memory serves me right, there is normally a message that you can close this tab because authentication is already done. But coming back here, we can see that it already authenticated because we were already logged into our GitHub account, and it pushed the repo now to our remote. So if I come back now to this repo and I refresh it, I should see the files that we created. Okay, so that does it for the setup. Now when it comes to deployment, the other thing that you'll need next is excuse me, will be a Vercel account. So just search for Vercel. Should be the first result. So vercel.com. Then there should be an option to sign up. So sign up for an account. Use your GitHub profile to create the account. So select hobby so that you're not asked to pay. Then just go through this process. If you're given the option to select GitHub as your way to authenticate, then select that. Okay. The reason for that will be clear when you get to the deployment part. So just go through the process of creating the account. I won't do that because I already have an account and it's linked to my GitHub profile, so I cannot create another account with the same profile. But just do that. It's a pretty straightforward process, and once you have the account, then you're all set for the masterclass. If you're viewing this on YouTube and you have no idea what masterclass I'm talking about. So I'm an instructor at a company called GOMYCODE at the moment of making this video, and ideally we hold masterclasses every so often. And this particular masterclass that I'm referring to is design a web page with HTML and CSS, and we do them live. But there are recordings that are shared later, and depending on whether I get authorization to or not, I might post the recording for this particular masterclass on this same channel. So if you have no idea what the masterclass I'm talking about is, then just check my channel if I'm allowed to. I'll update the what's it called, the description to show whether or not the masterclass is available on YouTube. But in case it's not, then this notice just serves to clear the question of what masterclass is you talking about. So if you're here from the masterclass group, then we'll meet live later when you go live. Okay, so the details will be shared there in the group. Okay, so till then, see ya.